television interview with the widow of John F. Kennedy's accused assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, Marina Oswald.
Marina Oswald, a hard copy world exclusive.
Hampered by war.
From Dallas, Texas, good evening. I'm Barry Nolan. Not far from where I'm standing, the course of history was changed forever. With the squeeze of a trigger, Camelot was over and President John F. Kennedy was dead. It is an event which affected us all, including the woman you're about to meet tonight. For the first time ever in a serious sit-down interview, Marina Oswald, the wife of the alleged assassin, talks to the public. She's probably not what you expected, but she does have one thing in common with us all, that terrible memory. Where were you when you heard the news?
Here's Mrs. Kennedy, the First Lady stepping from the plane. She's wearing a bright pink suit with a dark fur collar and a matching pink hat.
On the morning of Friday, November 22nd, Marina Oswald, a young Russian immigrant, sat with her two babies in Irving, Texas, and excitedly watched the arrival of America's president. When her friend, Ruth Payne, came home, Marina shared her enthusiasm and then went to her bedroom to get dressed. 12:30 p.m., the fateful moment. Ruth runs to tell Marina that the president has been shot. The attack, they said, came from the Texas School Book Depository, the building where Marina's husband, Lee Harvey Oswald, worked. Marina was worried. The previous spring, her husband had told her that he had shot at a local political figure. Marina and Lee had a bitter argument.
My face flashed, and I didn't want Ruth to witness that. So in order to compose myself, I just ran outside, and I was just saying, please don't be, late. That's just a mistake of somewhat.
Fearing the worst, and knowing her husband had a rifle, Marina ran to the garage to see if the gun was still there. She breathed a sigh of relief. The blanket in which it had been wrapped seemed undisturbed.
The blanket was there, so I kind of had a little bit of peace for that moment.
Right.
But when the police arrived, I kind of felt that's it.
You went to the garage again?
No, so they asked me questions. She
Yeah.
said, does your husband possess, rifle? And I was very embarrassed to admit this in front of Ruth Payne, that she gave us shelter and I harbor such a weapon.
Yeah.
And I said yes, and that was embarrassing, awful. So we went to the garage, I think.
Then, the moment of truth. A policeman picked up the blanket which had wrapped the rifle. The blanket sagged. Marina knew the gun was missing.
The blanket was empty, and it was, I cannot describe the feeling. It was overwhelmingly shocking to think of what a horrible crime my husband might commit.
These people have given me a hearing without legal representation or anything. You shoot the president? I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
This was a very bad surprise for me.
At breakfast time on that Friday, the biggest concern for 22-year-old Marina Oswald was taking care of her two kids here in this house in Irving, Texas, and dealing with a difficult new marriage. By lunchtime, she had heard the awful news from Dallas, and shortly after 3 o'clock that afternoon, when she left that driveway in a police car, this most unlikely of characters had been thrust into the spotlight in one of the most tragic dramas ever acted out on the stage of world events.
A presidential commission headed by Chief Justice Earl Warren concluded that Oswald did it and did it alone. The name Oswald was permanently inscribed in history books. Killer, madman, Marxist. Marina, barely speaking English, just 22 years old, mother of two babies, became widow of presidential assassin. She knew Lee had a rifle, that he often behaved secretively, and based on the official evidence presented to her, Marina believed her husband was guilty. For years, she tried to fade into anonymity, rejecting various conspiracy theories. But now, with new information surfacing, Marina has changed her opinion completely. She's not only open to new theories, she's become convinced that her husband was framed. In her first full television interview, she speaks with Best Evidence author David Lifton. She re-examines her life with Lee Harvey Oswald. Marina's story began in war-torn Russia. She lost her mother at a young age, and her stepfather rejected her. But she was well-read, and when she came of age, she enrolled in a pharmacy school. At 17, she moved to Minsk to live with a beloved aunt and her uncle, Colonel Ilya Prusakov, colonel of the MVD, the equivalent of our FBI. When she was 19, Marina went to a dance and her life was changed forever.
My aunt pushed me out of the door. She said, boy, you spent only 2.5 hours in front of the mirror. Don't you think you better go? I said, well, I don't want to go. So I went, and I wasn't expecting to see Lee or any American for that matter. A small town of Minsk, are you joking?
His name was Lee Oswald. He was an American working in a radio factory in Minsk.
Remember, if you see anybody suspicious, sit down beside another passenger.
The little boy who loved adventure, international intrigue, and spy stories became the ex-Marine who traveled from Fort Worth to Moscow and said he wanted to live in Russia for the rest of his life. This was the man Marina met at the dance, whom she married 6 weeks later, who announced just weeks afterwards that he wanted to return to the United States with his bride.
I compromised my relatives' position and their well-being, choosing to go with my husband. I don't care what country that would have been. I didn't choose America for political reasons either. I married American because it was flattering that foreigners pay attention to me, and I thought so much of myself then.
Meanwhile, in the United States, Kennedy was president. By the time Lee and Marina were granted exit visas from the Soviet Union, JFK had reached the midpoint of his 1,000 days. Within 4 months of his return to the U.S., Oswald is settled in Dallas and working in a photo lab that does government work. While Marina is tending to her baby, Lee is spending a great deal of time reading. There is also another side of Lee. He corresponds with 4 left-wing groups, including the Communist Party and Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Then, in March 1963, Lee orders a gun. April 10th, 1963, Marina's fears become reality. That night, he tells Marina that he used the rifle to shoot at retired General Edwin Walker, a prominent right-winger.
We have argument right away. How dare you to take in your hands to take somebody's life? So he told me, he said, you don't know anything about politics and he's no good man. I said, that doesn't make any difference at all. And I told him if Hitler, no, he said to his excuse, he said, what would you say? Would that be honorable then if somebody killed Hitler? How many millions of lives will be saved? Yeah. Well, you cannot argue with that, but I tell him this is not the same situation. If you don't like somebody's political stand, you go through natural process of debating or changing the systems or persuading the people to look, my theory is better and things like that, the peaceful way.
After the Walker incident, Lee took Marina to New Orleans, where he spent time handing out leaflets for the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. He got in a fight, got arrested, and made the news.
And are you a Marxist? Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers. But are you a Marxist? I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a Marxist. Oh, I would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, I'm a communist.
With Lee, it was always that emotional seesaw. You know, we do this and we go there, and just I never knew what tomorrow will bring.
One of the things that annoyed Marina about Lee Harvey Oswald was what she called his little boy games, his penchant for secrecy. For instance, during the last few weeks of his life, he lived here in this rooming house, and quite by accident, Marina discovered he was living here under an assumed name, O.H. Lee. But on Thursday, November 21st, the night before the assassination, Oswald's room here remained empty all night long.
I didn't shoot anybody, sir. I haven't been told what I'm here for.
Marina lives with the guilt of a widow who long ago condemned her husband as assassin, and now believes he was wronged.
Because of my want for Lee to be innocent, and I have to dissect every theory more scrupulously than anybody.
David Lifton's theories may sound far-fetched, but after 15 years of research, his book, Best Evidence, has become a bestseller. His conclusions: the body was altered, the autopsy was faked, the gun was not the murder weapon. Lee Harvey Oswald was framed as part of a sophisticated covert operation. Marina has become more receptive to research because, from her personal experience, another fact never seemed to fit.
I never could comprehend. In my mind, I cannot ever put Lee against Kennedy. that never makes sense to me.
Now,
That's why I so desperately try to find in this theory, what's the reason? It had to be something else.
Marina talks of the sadness Lee experienced when Jackie Kennedy had a miscarriage.
How much sympathy he had for the family. He always bragged about what a young and vivacious president America had, that not all fuddy, fuddy-duddies like in Russia. So he was really boasting about the country, the system, and John Kennedy. With all clean conscience, I can say, yes, he adored John Kennedy.
Adored Kennedy? But on Thursday, November 21st, the night before the assassination, another mystery. Marina and Ruth returned home to find Lee has paid an unexpected visit. As he folded diapers with Marina, he seemed particularly non-responsive to her interest in Kennedy's visit. Likewise, when Ruth Payne bubbled about the event,
"Ah, yes,"
a phrase common to him. That afternoon, he played with his children, seeming to savor every moment. When he left the next morning, he left Marina money to buy what she wanted. He removed his wedding ring, and he appears to have taken his rifle.
"27 years ago, this is where it was all supposed to have happened. Today, it's a museum, but according to official history, on November 22nd, 1963, this was a sniper's nest, where Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots, one of which killed the president.
Within a minute, a police officer confronted Oswald with a drawn gun. He was not on the 6th floor, where the rifle was found, but in the 2nd floor cafeteria, where he was having a Coke.
You have been.
Nobody said what?
sir.
You have been.
Nobody said what? Okay, man, I ain't hear you.
Okay. What did you do in Russia?
Almost 3 decades later, there is strong evidence to support the case that Oswald did not fire the fatal shot, but we never did get to hear his side of the story. 2 days after the Kennedy assassination, Marina's husband was murdered by Jack Ruby on national television. The hatred against Oswald was such that a priest could not be found to officiate at the funeral. Reporters served as pallbearers. In the end, it was just Lee's mother and brother, Marina, and the 2 babies.
Well, how do you respond when someone says, how could you have married an assassin? Have you been asked?
Well, oh yes. You don't marry an assassin. If you go to prison, choose assassin, that's marry an assassin. You marry the man, good or bad, and if he become good or assassin or whatever, that's not the person. You arrive to it later.
Because of her own experience during the Walker episode and the official version of the shooting, first from the police, later from the FBI, finally from the Warren Commission, Marina was persuaded that her husband was guilty.
So they asked me, Mrs. Oswald then, with all the evidence before you, what would your conclusion be? Guilty or not guilty? Guilty. Answer yes or no. So I so desperately want to say no. But the overwhelming evidence that it was to go by was that he's guilty. So between those 2 choices, I have only one, to say guilty.
Marina, do you believe that your husband killed President Kennedy?
I don't want to believe, but I have too much facts, and facts tell me that Lee shot Kennedy.
It's been a long psychological journey for Marina Oswald.
I went through a range of emotions, guilt, tried to prove that I'm worthy of this country, tried to go backwards to please people that I even don't want to please, just to show, please like me, I'm okay.
The widow of Lee Harvey Oswald continues her story in a moment.
I emphatically deny these charges.
I believe the evidence exists right now to prove that he is not guilty of the crime he was accused of. For example, I cannot paint a picture of Lee as a wonderful man, as an innocent bystander who simply was accused of. He did not paint this kind of picture, and I'm not going to make it any different.
How tough was it for Marina Oswald to come around to the preferred belief that her husband's innocent?
I think it's been very difficult for her because she knows that she wants to believe that, and she guards against herself overcompensating, so to speak, in that direction. She is concerned that she has a natural bias, and so she tries to be objective.
I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir.
Because of my want for Lee to be innocent, and I have to dissect every theory more scrupulously than anybody else, because I don't want to make a fool out of myself to begin with. Right. So I want to deal only with evidence that will withstand the time. You learn to live not without the guilt, but you shed because you are actually many times, but I also angry at him. He left me to swim in that dirty water that I didn't think I deserved it. So many times I question, did he use me as well? Well, did he really care for me at all?
Marina has come a long way from the 22-year-old widow. She lives in a secluded area of Texas, has remarried, and has a third child.
I'm very blessed with my children. And so this is my contribution to society. I think every mother who raised good children should be proud of them. So America wasn't deprived or should be burdened with me of my children.
But not a day passes when Marina does not think of November 22nd, 1963.
I feel like a hunchback. You know, that something was trapped in me and I cannot get rid of it. I want to know the truth. I want to know the whole truth. I want to know what happened to me.
She still tries to reconcile the conflicting faces of Oswald, the studious, intellectual young man who liked to discuss politics and adored President Kennedy, and the image of Oswald, the murderer of a beloved president.
If Lee could come back, what would you say?
Then I would ask, did you do it or not? Because at that time, when I started questioning, I already was debating, did you do it or not? I want to be certain from him. But now I think we'll ask you, who are you?
Years later, Marina looks back and tries to evaluate her life and the man she met at the dance.
You take chances with any man. You can know a man for 8 years or 10 years, and when you marry, it could be an entirely different person.
Well, did you love Lee Harvey Oswald?
Of course.
It is in the nature of human beings to want to know things with great certainty, to want to know exactly what was going on in Lee Harvey Oswald's life, precisely what happened on that day in Dallas. How frustrating to wonder what America would be like today if Kennedy had lived. What must it be like, then, for Marina Oswald to wonder what her life would be like today if she had chosen not to go to that dance so long ago where she met a young man who changed her life forever? I'm Barry Nolan. Good evening.